بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. What is local sighting? Some people say just looking for the moon in our own country, that's local sighting, UK. Other people say if we are looking for the moon in Morocco, that's local sighting. Others say if we're looking for the moon in South Africa, that's also local sighting. So there is a lot of confusion, what is local sighting? And in this short presentation, I want to explore this from a technical, scientific perspective to see if we can define local sighting in the light of Quran and Sunnah, inshallah. So my name is Kamaruddin from ICA, and I would like to explain local sighting using the day and night maps in the light of the ayat of the Quran,
وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا
وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا. So in Tafsir ibn Kathir, Qatada radiallahu anhu says, this means in the night of Hilal, the moon must follow the sun. What does that mean? It means the sun set first and then the moon become visible until the moon set. So it is telling us the sighting of the moon is between sunset to moonset. So it defines a location where it's going to become visible, because sunset and moonset is for a given location, and it is not same for all the places. It is specific to your own location. So I have a few slides to explain that. And because I have mentioned that previously, one or two brothers with us here today may be familiar, but I want to put it in the context of both Fiqh and science, inshallah ta'ala. So I will share my screen. Okay, so local and regional boundaries, and in the light of sharing of night and the legal jurisdiction. Let's have a look. Now, in terms of the visibility of the moon, between sunset and moonset, if the moon is visible in a given area through all the seasons, then we can say this is a local for sighting of the moon. Because regardless of its being winter, summer, spring, and autumn, the moon is visible in a given area. Whether this given area is a large city or a country, as long as all the people in those designated area can see the moon through all seasons, all 12 months, then we're going to call it local. And any sighting in that place would be defined as local. Now, in terms of Fiqh, if the area is under the same Qadi, same judge, or same Hilal committee, and they can decide for that area, then they can, their decision will be binding on the people of the whole area. So together with that, we can define local sighting. So I'm going to explain that further a bit later on. So when I say local sighting, ikhtilaf matali, okay, I mean these two conditions must be fulfilled. Now, there are other conditions which relates to borrowing from neighboring locations. If the moon is visible between two similar, two areas, similar distance or close by each other, and they share the visibility through all the season or most of the season. It is slightly after your local area or slightly before, then we can say it is in your region. I'll explore that bit later on. And in order to borrow news from any nearby location within your same region, there is a Fiqh condition that that area authority or committee or people must be doing moon sighting all 12 months of the year, okay? Not just Ramadan and Eid, but all 12 months. This is a Fiqh condition, and I have been advised about this by Mufti Ikram, so we'll have to see if it is all the Sunni madhab or just one or two. But one of the conditions of borrowing sighting news from a neighboring location is that it has to be done all 12 months. Furthermore, you can only borrow if your 29th matches their 29th. So if the local count for UK is 29 matches the 29th of a neighboring location, then you are in principle allowed to borrow it. This is another condition. Furthermore, there should be an agreement to share the details of the testimonies between those locations. So Qadi to Qadi, Qadi in a Muslim country and committee in a non-Muslim country. Okay, Hilal committee or council of scholars in a non-Muslim country, but Qadi appointed judge would be in a Muslim country. So if all these further four conditions met, because they are nearby locations, we can call this regional sighting or unity of horizon, ittihad matla. Now, I don't know why am I getting a lot of squeaking noise. Okay. So these are some backgrounds to local sighting and regional sighting conditions. Now I am going to give an example of two keywords. One keyword I'm going to use is going to be original position, okay, asli ahkam. So what is that? So there are many examples, but I thought I'll choose this one from a recent problem. In order for us to pray in Jamaat, in congregation, standing shoulder to shoulder is a requirement, okay? So qiyam and standing in line, shoulder to shoulder. This is the original position of Quran and Sunnah. It is Sunnah, but there is an ayat in the Quran which says, do ruku with those who do ruku, implying to pray in Jamaat prayer. And so in Hadith, we are told that we have to stand shoulder to shoulder as implemented by the Khulafa Rashidin. So this is the original ahkam, okay? So Jamaat prayer, shoulder to shoulder, okay? Now, I want to show that if there is an exceptional case, such as COVID lockdown, and we are told for our own safety, we have to maintain social distancing, right? Now we have deviated from our original position to a new position, and this is coming through Fatawa, okay? So this is called istisnai halat in Urdu, and I think istisnai is also Arabic word, exceptional case. Now, after the pandemic is over, after the restriction is over, we know automatically we must go back to the original position. But the question I am wanting to highlight is that what if we were doing this social distancing for, say, that some 40, 50 years, and a few generation of our children never seen us pray shoulder to shoulder. So they don't have any practical experience. So there is a likelihood they think this is the original position. Think for a moment. Moon sighting issue in UK has been going on for some 50 years, since 1970s, according to the Y2E book. And people have forgotten the original position of sighting in our own location. So it has become something unfamiliar, just like this. So I want these two keywords, right? Original position and exceptional position. Now, I've defined the definition. I've explained the definition on local sighting and regional sighting, and I've defined the keywords, original position and exceptional position, which is the debate. Now I will come to the main part of the boundaries. Okay, so this is where I want to explain, define the boundary. This is the map using the day and night map. Why do you get this? Various websites, timeandday.com or skyviewcafe.net. It calculates for every location sunset and sunrise. Similarly, you can have moonset or moonrise, and then it plots it on a world map so you can see the sunrise and sunset through different dates. Okay, and if I look at the data from WebSurf, I've taken the easternmost city where we have sighters, Great Yarmouth, and I look at all the seasons, then I can find that the difference between sunset and moonset is about 1.5 hours. Okay, so here in June, it's about 81 minutes B code and 85 minutes A code. So what is that? This is the moonset lag time. So if you subtract moonset time and sunset time from moonset time, you will get this lag time. So our visibility window, lighting of the moon, is that lag time. So for all practical purposes, if we can share the visibility of the moon times through all the areas of our locations in our country or neighboring cities, then we say this is local sighting, because we have the same possibility of sighting the moon anywhere within the area. Okay, where do I get that? I have already mentioned that this is from the ayat of the Quran, and by the sun and its brightness, and by the moon as it follows the sun. Okay, Surah Shams. So, and the Sahaba have explained that this relates to the moon in the night of Hilal. So visibility window equals the lag time, which is equal to moonset time minus the sunset time, about 1 hour to 1.5 hours, depending on the season that we are in. Okay, which would be slightly different in the equatorial region compared to northern latitudes. So this is the data that I am using in my visibility map or in my day and night calculation. Now, rather than going through 365 days of the year, I am going to just choose 4 days. When the day and nights are half and half, 12 hours each, so it's autumn and spring, and when the day and night is tilting towards the sun and away from the sun. And this gives our summer and winter season. So if we can get those 4 data points in our region, then we can map out the visibility area for local sighting. Okay, so here the date on the top left is March 21, and sunset is 1810 British summertime? No, this is GMT. Okay, so this is the sunset time. And now if I go to an hour and 10 minutes later, then we see that sunset over here covers that area of whole of UK. Now, remember I said that the moonset lag time visibility window is about 80 minutes, 1 hour, 20 minutes. Okay, so I am using that window. I am saying if the sunset is on the eastern point, then we go for the sunset in the western point. This will be the width of our visibility window. And when the season is autumn and spring, we see that when the moon is above the UK horizon, it is also above the Western Europe horizon. It is also in the Western Africa horizon, including Morocco and Algeria and Tunisia and Portugal and Spain and France and all these regions. So you can see that visibility window is shared by all these things. So this is in March. Okay, if I now put a banding here, so I am saying let's start our color banding on the sunset in the eastern point, and then sunset in the western point, and this is our visibility window. So keep that in mind. Okay, now we're gonna move it away. Now we're gonna jump to June, the longest day of the year in the northern hemisphere, and it will be the shortest day of the year in the southern hemisphere. Okay, as the Earth is tilting 23.5 degrees towards the sun here. So sunset is curved, follows that region, and you can see that we have not had the sunset yet. The neighboring region have already finished their sunset, and probably the moonset has finished. So in this summer, they would see the moon just before us. We are starting to see the moon in that area, Western Europe or Western Africa. Okay, so we will be slightly behind them. Okay, so that's the sunset. Now, if we go to an hour and 10 minutes or so later and say this is the sunset curve, which is would be the moonset. So that is our visibility window, and then we put that banding again between two sunset of the eastern point and western point, and keep that in mind that it is in that angle. Then we go back to September, which is similar to now, last month, and we come back to spring type of sharing the day and night, half and half day and half and night. And the visibility window is also similar to in March. So we put this banding again, and then we jump to winter, and we see sunset curve is slanting towards the right. Here, the northern hemisphere day is the shortest and the night is the longest. Okay, but it's the opposite in the southern hemisphere. It is their summertime in December. They're having the longest day and the shortest night. So let us put the banding here. So sunset just before eastern point of UK, and then if we move that to an hour or so, the visibility window, and you can see here that we would have sighted the moon before it is their sunset in the neighboring region. So we are slightly ahead of them, and so we sighted the moon, and if we not sighted, then we might say have they sighted it, and soon after they would have given us some news. Okay, so let's put that banding together, and now we remove all this banding, have a clear patch, okay, and let's only put those banding without the day and night curves. So autumn and spring, same cover, okay, summer is there and winter is there. Now, I would say those of you have studied group theory or mathematics at a higher level, Venn diagram. So all these seasons which share the visibility is the inside that triangle, okay? So that means through all the seasons, the moon would be visible in that area, but not in the outside area, because we are not sharing the sunset to moonset area of the globe. And if I make that a circle, because the world is a hemisphere, world is a sphere, so we'll do that. These are all approximate, just to explain the concept of how to define local area or local boundary in a scientific way. So this is the area which we can confidently say is local sighting, because the probability of any one of these locations sighting the moon is almost equal, okay, give or take few minutes, 10 minutes here or 10 minutes there, okay? So I am going to say that is equal. Now, just like the COVID lockdown, we have an exceptional case where we are not allowed to come near each other, have to keep social distancing. We have an exceptional case. So now we resort to fatawa, we are helpless, we have this haraj, we have this hardship, rescue us, help us. How are we going to do our Ramadan and Eid? How we do the moon sighting? So we say, okay, let's expand our local area to the local region, okay? So how far should you go? I am saying that the outer triangle of that those markers should be the limit of expanding local region, because most of the time, year, at least 6 to 8 months, our visibility will be same in that region, and few months it will be slightly before us or slightly after us. So this is the exceptional case, okay? Istisnai halat, okay? The deviated position. So I say, if you want to go regional, then you have to keep within the outer triangle, and local is within the inner triangle. And this idea is not plucked from the air. It agrees with the fiqh ruling. Allama Dr. Khalid Mahmood says in his book, similarity of rising time. So that is within that. And also he said, it is a misconception that Ittihad matla, unity of horizon, global sighting is a Hanafi position. That is not correct. That is not true. He says in his book that the Hanafi scholars only use that for nearby location, and they reject it for far distance country. And that agrees with our understanding of the world in the present time. Okay, may not have been the case in 15th century, but certainly in 21st century, that agrees that citing Ittihad matla or unity of horizon only for location within reasonable distance, because time zones makes parts of the world night, other parts are day. Okay, so now using the same principle, I want you to fast forward, or is it backward in time, to the 7th century, where the Kuraib Hadith talks about the matla, the sighting. So you are all aware the Kuraib, famous Hadith of Kuraib in Sahih Muslim, that the moon was sighted on Friday in Damascus. Okay, Damascus, if you see my mouse here, over here. And then end of Ramadan, the traveler came to Medina, and Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says that we saw it the next day. So we will not begin our count from the sighting from a far distant city. These two cities, Medina and Damascus, are two cities in two far distant countries. So when they mention city, they're not mentioning city to your next door. They're talking about cities of the world here, maybe capital of the world. So I want to fast forward this concept I've explained, and saying that if we use the same banding principle, you can do that as an assignment. You will see that Damascus in Syria also have this area as local sighting, which is under my mouth. And then if I do the same in Medina, then that is a separate area of local sighting. And this local sighting, they do not overlap at all. So now I can use this explanation to support the Kuraib Hadith, saying it is not, as some people misunderstood or misinterpret, saying, oh, this is in the West and that is in the East, or vice versa, and that's why they didn't follow. They didn't follow because they do not share the visibility window of each location. Okay, now I want you to go to 14th century. So the Sahaba talked about this Kuraib Hadith in the 7th century. Now let's fast forward to 14th century. That is the time Shaykhul Islam Ibn Taimyyah rahimullah, who used to live in Damascus. He was a Hanbali scholar, but accepted by all Maslak as a leading scholar of his time. And he said that if there is a sighting in the East, then it can be used by the people in the West, but not the other way around. Duna aks. Okay, so Majmua Fatawa, you will find this explanation by Ibn Taimyyah. Now, what it is not clear is that this, the East and West, he never ever said this is the whole world, because the area under discussion is implied maximum traveling distance of their time. Okay, maximum distance of traveling distance of their time through which news can be conveyed. Now, in the 14th century, news couldn't be conveyed from Australia to America, east to west, in one evening, especially when we are day and night apart. So my suggestion is that ruling applies to the east-west of the local area, okay, distance of travel. And if I were to talk with some of the scholars' names I mentioned, the books they've written, I think they would fully agree with that, because then it starts making sense, okay? Because this area is within a time zone. Okay? So you can do that as I've done that, and come to the conclusion that those local area of Syria is separate from the local area in Medina. So now I want to recap what I have said before, and that visibility of the moon should be shared through all seasons, and it will be under the same jurisdiction. Then that is fulfilling the criteria of local sighting. Okay, and if you have exceptional case, right, due to some haraj, some hardships, and you want to expand your region, then all these additional conditions should be met. And I am also saying that the old equivalent of Ittihad Matla, unity of horizon, is commonly misinterpreted as global sighting. That is total nonsense. I will challenge anybody who can prove to me that is true. And I have given you reason why I think that is not the true meaning. Ittihad matla, unity of horizon, refers to regional sighting and not global sighting. And regional sighting is exceptional situation. If you have some kind of hardship or some kind of difficulties, then you resort to that, and only for the duration of that hardship and difficulties. It is not a free check for eternity, okay? So if someone injured there, I was teaching today and I was asked to cover a PE lesson, and in the high school, people are playing football. Now, if somebody injured his knees and he has to pray, he can't pray standing. So he is in exceptional situation. So for the duration of his injury, is allowed to, he will be permitted to sit and do his prayer. But if he says, he can run and he can walk and he's fully recovered, is he allowed to do that forever? And we have taken moon sighting as a joke. We are using exceptional case for decades ago for eternity. So we need to go back to the original position, which is local sighting. Okay, and there are Fiqh conditions that must be fulfilled, testimony as well as declaration, and that's where we need a council of ulama. And I've been going around campaigning, asking ulama to join us, because we can give all the information and verify the data, but because it relates to ibadah, the ulama are the best people to make that decision for us. So this is the definition of local sighting in the light of Quran, Sunnah, and science. So I shall end this here, and I'll take one or two questions before I move on to the next part of the presentation. Jazakallah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.